All right, we have more people from Mexico, Mali, Ireland, India, USA, China, USA, Canada, Korea, Indonesia, Serbia, Ecuador, Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Dubai, Mexico. Wonderful. Very excited to see everyone here today from around the world. All right, so with that, we're going to be getting started now with Rosanna Gao from Yale University. Very excited to have you here today, Rosanna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. It's so great, like meeting everyone and just like seeing like how like crazy where everyone's from. I'm from Long Island. My name is Rosanna, and I just again thank you so much for joining us today as we kind of delve into the topic of Asian American representation in filmmaking and the arts. So, yeah, can you please go to the next slide? All right, so before we begin, I just wanted to kind of go over what I'll be speaking about. First, we'll have a quick intro, then the state of Asian American representation in Hollywood, the emergence of Asian American independent cinema, the importance of Asian American representation, strategies for improving Asian American representation, Music for Change, which is a nonprofit I began, and also just a conclusion. Oh, next slide, sorry. My name is Rosanna. I am a student at Yale, double majoring in economics and theater studies. I'm from Long Island, New York. I've grown up here all my life, and I began an organization called Music for Change. I'll dive more into that later, but basically, our goal is to use citizen artistry to create social impact in the world. And I was speaking with Mark earlier. I know a lot of what he does with this film festival is kind of create a free festival and create more opportunities for marginalized groups, especially within film. And that's something very similar that we do at Music for Change. We basically fundraise and we create scholarships for awarding low income BIPOC students within the arts. And growing up in a community like New York, I often felt as if the arts needed more diversity. There was a lot of barriers, a lot of fees that were involved, and you had to kind of come from a family where they could afford these private lessons or these art programs. So a lot of the work that I do revolves around that. Also, I've dived a little bit into tech. I'm a campus partner for Ground Up Ventures, and they're basically this VC firm. And I was also a past international thespian officer at the Educational Theater Association. I don't know if you guys heard of that. But I was able to travel to many states, and they hosted theater festivals in each state. They also hosted the International Thespian Festival, which really brought a lot of theater makers from all over the world. And I was able to attend that and host some events there last year. So super excited to dive more into Asian American representation in film. Oh, next slide, please. All right, so to set the stage, let's take a moment to reflect on the history of Asian American representation in the media and the arts. For far too long, Asian Americans have been underrepresented in Hollywood films and TV shows, and according to a recent CNBC article, in 2022, Asian Americans accounted for just 2.3% of leads and 6.5% of roles in movies released in theaters and films. And behind the scenes, Asian Americans represented only 5.6% of directors and 4.5% of writers for those same films. So definitely a very small percentage of representation have been from Asian Americans. And when you think of film, film reflects, many aspects of our society, and it's kind of media, film, and theater and the arts. It's what we see, and kind of having that misrepresentation, underrepresentation may create stereotyping or just false stereotypes upon people. However, amidst these challenges, there has been a lot of breakthroughs in recent years, and films like Crazy Rich Asians and TV shows like Fresh Off the Boat have brought a lot of Asian American stories to the forefront, featuring predominantly Asian American casts. And let's acknowledge and also celebrate some of those remarkable Asian American actors and filmmakers who've had a major impact on the industry. So definitely, I think like within recent years, there has been like an uprise of this representation, which is a good thing. However, we can definitely improve. Constant Wu, Stephen Yuan, Aquafina are just examples of people, Asian Americans who've been a part of many films and kind of are at the forefront of film. And let's also not forget about many talented filmmakers such as Justin Lin and Chloe Zhao, who is pictured in the middle. Next slide, please. All right, so the emergence of Asian American in the arts, as mentioned earlier, there has been many movies such as Minari highlighting the immigrant story, as well as in theater. There is a musical called Allegiance, and it centers around the Japanese internment camps. And there also recently there has been an Oscar award film called Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I really don't cry when it comes to films, but I think when I saw that I was like, wow, this is very different. So I think that, as mentioned earlier, there has been a small percentage of representation. However, recently I think that a lot of not, I wouldn't say popular, but shows that have been there's been a lot of Asian American representation, I would say, in shows that are kind of like extremely popular in a lot of mainstream shows, I would say. Next slide, please. All right, so the importance of Asian American representation in media and the arts. I think despite a lot of the successes that recently happened, we cannot ignore the challenges and barriers that Asian Americans face in the entertainment industry. They often lack opportunities and representation in mainstream media, and oftentimes when Asian Americans do land roles, they are frequently typecast into narrow stereotypes, either as kind of the best friend to the main lead or the funny side character. And furthermore, there's been a lot of pressure to conform to white standards of beauty and culture, and limited access to resources and funding for independent projects, and discrimination and racism, both overtly and also systematic. However, the rise of Asian American independent cinema has been a significant turning point, and it has given Asian American filmmakers really a platform to tell their own stories, challenge Hollywood's limited representation, and bring forth more authentic and nuanced portrayals of Asian Americans. Through film festivals and streaming platforms, Asian American independent cinema has gained a wider audience, influence in mainstream media, as well as being more inclusive. Next slide, please. All right, so now let's talk about kind of strategies for improving Asian American representation. So first, something would be increasing funding for independent cinema that highlights Asian American stories and perspectives. I think this is not just the case for Asian Americans, but the case for so many different races, demographics in all over the world, representing their stories and making sure that their voices get heard, and also promoting diversity in casting and hiring by actively seeking out and hiring Asian American actors, directors, writers, and other creatives. Another way to kind of support these and improve representation is supporting their art by providing mentorship, resources, and platforms to showcase their work, and also encouraging Asian American representation in mainstream media by advocating for more diverse casting and storylines. I also recently read an article that talked about kind of the mental health amongst many Asian Americans, and kind of the pressure to fit into traditional roles, such as like being a doctor or being a lawyer. So I think also a lot of the underrepresentation may come from just like the culture itself and how many, Asian American families are more, well, like want their children to have more traditional roles, but maybe expanding their traditional thoughts into a more, arts related career. It can be a starting point for having more Asians just wanting to try theater and wanting to try out film. And I think a lot of the potential challenges and obstacles to implement these strategies come from a lack of funding and resources from independent cinema and also other Asian American focused projects. It's hard to find funding. There are a lot of limited opportunities from mainstream media, and also there's a lot of stereotyping and bias and casting and hiring decisions that may prevent Asian American representation and BIPOC representation in certain roles or industries, and a lack of awareness and understanding about the importance of diversity. So hopefully having these conversations and talking more about how we can make, the arts a more inclusive environment will make casting directors and hiring decisions, and people who are in hiring decisions want to make sure and understand the importance of diversity. Next slide, please. And now I just wanted to talk about Music for Change, which was the 501c3 non-for-profit that I began a few years ago. It all started out during the rise of the pandemic, and I did a lot of theater in high school. I had a lot of friends who did theater in high school, and we realized that because of the pandemic, a lot of shows and musicals that were going on had to be shut down because of COVID, and obviously they couldn't be done in person. And thanks to film and just like video in general, what I decided, kind of like a combination of the two. I was like, why don't you guys just record these videos on Zoom and we can kind of post it on YouTube and see if people want to watch your videos. And I got a lot of traction. A lot of my theater friends posted videos of them singing, dancing, or even just like songs that they were going to sing before the pandemic. And we posted those on YouTube. They shared it with their family, and it really cultivated a community of theater makers, artists, filmmakers, etc. Mark, could you go to the next slide, please? And basically, we've done a lot of more work from that. We started off as a small organization, just posting videos, and then we started building different chapters from different areas in the world. So we have a chapter in London, and they were able to perform for essential workers. We also performed at many Black Lives Matter protests. And we were able to partner with many various different organizations, such as Clarity to Charity and India Bulls Foundation. And since it was basically going on during COVID, we wanted to first raise funds and donate it to COVID relief. So we initially donated our first $4,000 to COVID relief, and then after that, we reached out to different organizations, and I ended up producing a concert at Carnegie Hall, which was sponsored by Bloomberg Philanthropies, and we had students from around the world perform songs in person, like after the pandemic, and we were able to raise money and create scholarships for marginalized students within the arts. And besides that, we also began an app, and we were able to win the Lincoln Center Innovation Contest. And basically, this app surrounded chamber music and how we can bring more communities in chamber music, because it's usually kind of known as a more like white elder dominant field. However, we wanted to spread awareness and show the amazing work of chamber music from all different people around the world, all various diverse backgrounds and ethnicities. Next slide, please. Oh, and these are just about us. Our goal is to spread positivity and hope through the universal language of music, some of our videos, and some of our chapters and where our videos came from. Next slide, please. And lastly, conclusion. So I talked a lot about Asian American independent cinema and how it has become a powerful vehicle for exploring themes that resonate deeply with audiences, and how these films delve into the struggle of Asian Americans and their culture, and the impact of race and racism on individual experiences and relationships, the complexity of family dynamics and intergenerational conflicts, and kind of the intersections of gender, sexuality, and race within the arts. However, what are kind of the action items that you guys can take, and what are the next steps to kind of create a more representative community of theater makers? I would say number one, try to stream any Asian American musicians, artists, films, shows. More streams can lead to success and more opportunities for these artists, which can lead to an increase in representation of Asian Americans in media. Um, Next, avoid assumptions or stereotypes. Remember that everyone is unique in their own ways, and their ethnicity does not define who they are. Learn about the history of anti-Asian racism to understand anti-Asian marginalization and hatred today. I would also listen to the stories if of your Asian American friends, advocate and or protest alongside them. Donate if you can to organizations that support or combat um, inequality, hate crimes, and mental health. Some examples are Stop AAPI Hate and the Anti Defamation League. And lastly, choose color conscious casting, which is defined as taking into consideration the actor's skin color, body shape, and other characteristics. Fund, support, and produce BIPOC written work, and further communities and learn about their communities. So that's all that I have for today. Would love to answer any questions that anyone has related to this topic or just my past experience as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosanna. We appreciate that. Very inspiring. I was inspired myself just listening to the presentation. Thank you. Okay, and now we are going to go to the Q&A session. If you could message your question in the chat, we would appreciate that. All right, so as they're coming in, let me just see what we have so far. So we have a question from Vid. When discussing Asian American representation in the media, it often seems to focus more on East Asian Americans rather than South Asian American representation. Why do you think this happens, and what steps can be taken to address this imbalance?
Yeah, Vid, I think that is a great question, and that's actually something that we talked about during the theater festival that I attended last year. I think I'm not sure why that happens. I think that possibly more East Asian representation was shown in the arts. It started off more as that, and kind of people just continued that and kind of forgotten about South Asian American representation. I think that definitely is an occurrence in film. I think what steps we can take to make sure how to address this imbalance is basically whenever there are panels that kind of talk about this, to make sure that you kind of have representation from both East Asian Americans and also South Asian Americans as well. And also, doing kind of whenever, so I think that's definitely a good way to make sure that to take a step to make sure that we can address this imbalance. But I think also, taking the time to hear about the South Asian American representation, about their experience, is something that we can take to make sure that more of their stories are getting told. And I think that a lot of the times, I always kind of emphasize the importance of writers. I think writers create stories, they create films, and I hope writers learn more, about, South Asian American culture, or even if they are South Asian Americans themselves, write stories representing their communities and their cultures. And I hope that if more of these stories are getting written, more of these stories will get, shown and told and seen in both like theater, on stage, or on film.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosanna. Next, we have a question from Alex. He says, I have two questions. Uh, First, he says afterward he's interested in getting in contact with you, so we can arrange that through email. Alex, you can email me at swift@lightfilmfest.org, and we can arrange contact information. And his second question was, he was wondering how diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives could be used to systematically combat inequality.
These are really great questions. And I think that an initiative we can definitely do is, I especially, we talked a lot about this in the theater festival that I attended last year. And I think that DEI can be a very, there's not a, it's not like a yes or no thing. It's very iffy, and there's a big middle ground. So one initiative that we wanted to do was basically we had presentations like this from various organizations, people who were kind of like talking about theater. And what we did was we made sure that 80% of those presentations were from BIPOC individuals. So in that was kind of that was kind of a systematic way, I would say, to combat this inequality and make sure that more voices are being heard and told. So I think like I do think that sometimes a lot of like corporations or companies are like, oh, we're expanding DEI, but there aren't really like numbers that support that. So maybe that is an example of an initiative that you can take. I think also maybe for casting, you want your cast to be X amount of like BIPOC individuals, or it could be any demographic kind of to improve kind of the DEI. And also, I think DEI doesn't just mean diversity, like racial diversity. I think it can mean a lot of different things. So just making sure like people are comfortable, like their voices are heard, and they always feel as if they can come to upper positions for any like to make sure that they're comfortable and they could talk to kind of like older members or like senior people within the company, within the organization, etc.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Now we have a question with two thumbs up from other people. From Yara, she said, how can we avoid stereotypes about our race? In my case, I'm Latina, and still use the proper characteristics of our culture. I mean, how can we use our culture to educate and avoid stereotypes?
Yeah, I think that making sharing resources and articles are a good way to start. During high school, I wrote a research paper about East Asian American representation in theater, and with the question that Vid mentioned earlier, I actually began my research paper as just like Asian American representation within theater. However, I wanted to focus more on East Asian American representation because I am East Asian American myself, and I was able to share that resource to to my friends and like people that I knew were in the theater community. So I think you could definitely start by, just like spreading awareness, sharing articles. And my friends who are South Asian wrote about South Asian American representation within theater. So it was very cool, like learning about her story and also going off of the previous question, like learning about her story and learning about mine and how that's very different, even though we both are Asian American. And I think that just kind of like sharing articles and making sure that your friends are well educated. I think sometimes it can feel very exhausting, and I think it can feel very exhausting being the person who's always kind of like trying to spread awareness about these issues. However, people like you are people who are advancing and educating individuals. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rosanna. Next, we have a question from Isabella. She says, I just want to say, Rosanna, you're amazing. Also, do you think you'd ever consider and address people who are neurodivergent in the Asian community?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and I actually had experience with this. I posted during the rise of the hate crimes and like COVID. in my local community, I'm from Long Island, New York, and I would say I'm in a small town called Great Neck. I would say that it is pretty diverse, of all cultures. And there was a video going around. It was during a Trump rally, and it was about a person who said "Go back to China" or something like that, some racist comment. And I posted that on my Instagram, and that blew up. And I was able to speak to Next Shark, which is like this Asian American organized news source. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but I think that when posting that video, of course, it got a lot of support. But however, there was a lot of backlash. I had a lot of people in the comments saying, being very racist. And I think whenever I see that, I obviously get very upset. However, I think that what makes me feel better is that they saw that video, and hopefully, even though they're still saying racist comments, hopefully that video had some effect on them, and it was able to show them, like, the hatred that this has caused, to many in the community, and it was able to get a lot of support. So I think whenever it comes to that, I kind of just like ignore those people. I try to educate them if possible in a civil way. However, I don't want to, start fighting, I don't want to get violent at all. So I think when it comes to that, I try to educate them. And if that does not go well, I would just ignore them.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. Now we have a question from Sananda. She says, "Hi, you mentioned that only 5.6% of directors in Hollywood are Asian American. You also suggested for Asians to represent their communities. I am making documentaries about local buskers, homeless women, and period poverty in Bandung, Indonesia. I was wondering, how do I represent this and get recognized by Hollywood, hopefully? Thank you."
Yeah, so I think definitely start submitting to film festivals. Either it's this film festival, or other film festival. I know that, money is definitely an issue. So there's a lot of like grants for young filmmakers. So definitely look into that if you need more funding. Even there's like mentorship programs if you need help with anything. Definitely check out those mentorship programs. And I would just say, literally submit your film to any opportunity you can. Like, try to get it out there. There's a contest that I submitted for. It was called the New York Times Multimedia Contest, and I submitted a film regarding Asian American. It was kind of like COVID-19, hate crimes, etc. So definitely submit to that. There's just so many opportunities online if you search it up. So I think just get the word out there, and it will expand once it gets out there.
Okay, thank you very much for that advice. Okay, and now we have a question from Doreen. She says, "What causes or organizations can we support or look into for internships or volunteer work to educate ourselves more on these topics as students?"
Yeah, I know there's one organization called Act to Change. They are great. They're an sorry, anti-bullying, anti-racism organization. They've done a lot of work within youth, and trying to prevent bullying, prevent hatred. So definitely look into that. I was able to recently attend one of their galas in Washington, D.C., which was awesome. I don't know if you guys know Daniel Day Kim. He was there, he spoke. I met up with many individuals in policy, activism, and the organization's just great. I'm so excited to be a part of that community. And I just literally filled out an application. I was like able to become an ambassador and work on stuff like that. So definitely like go into that or look into that organization. It's called Act to Change. And you'll definitely be able to like join their team.
Thank you very much for that advice.
Cool.
And now we have a similar question from Josh. He says, "Do you know of any grant programs catered towards Asian or Asian American creatives?"
I don't know on the top of my head, but I know that if you search it up, you'll definitely find opportunities. I know Act to Change does a lot of like grants as well, so definitely look into that. And also, I a lot of schools have grants. I think it's more college related. Schools have a lot of grants, but I'm not sure. Like in my high school, we didn't have any grants, but at Yale, we're able to apply for many grants. So some of my friends, they like one of my friend, he is from Indonesia actually, and he got full funding to go to Indonesia this summer and create his film. And that funding covers like his food, his plane tickets, his hotels, even his like film equipment. So in college, I think that's definitely a great opportunity. I'm not sure if they have those in high schools, but definitely look into like uh, your school. They might have it, and then also just Google. Just Google has been great.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. And now we have a question. We have from Liam. He says, great points. I really enjoyed the presentation. Do you think this movement is solely up to Asian American creatives to lead? Rosanna, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I you cut off for a second.
Oh, I apologize about that. We have a question from Liam. He says, great points. I really enjoyed the presentation. Do you think this movement is solely up to Asian American creatives to lead?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Solely
Yeah,
up.
yeah, I apologize about that. And maybe
Maybe it's my way.
yeah, it might be yours. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about that. So we have from Lynn. He says, great points. I really enjoyed the presentation. Do you think this movement is solely up to Asian American creatives to lead?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to Asian American representation, you should have people kind of a part of that community to tell the stories. I think a lot of the times when you look at various just in theater in general, there's a historic musical called Miss Saigon, and it was about the Vietnam War, and it was really shown in like a Western white perspective, and the the musical was written by white individuals. So I think whenever it comes to kind of this Asian American representation, you want to be having like truthful, vulnerable stories from people who've experienced those issues. So I think whenever it comes to kind of like the story itself and the experience, that it should come from an Asian American individual who's gone through that experience. I think when it revolves other things such as like creative work or costuming, I don't think that it needs to be Asian American. However, I think that the story needs to really be an Asian American experience.
Okay, thank you. And now we have a question from Paris. They say, do you plan on focusing more on activism, acting, and directing, or all of the above after graduating from college?
Yeah, I definitely want to continue that. I think right now I'm more into producing. I was very into performing when I was in like high school and middle school. I was like auditioning for agencies like for one time. But right now, what I really like about producing kind of is more um, of the like bigger leadership role you can take. I think in theater, I love doing acting. I loved being on stage. However, I think a lot of the creative work came kind of from the director or the producer, someone who is like more like in charge of the show. So I think I personally would just want to go into producing, and I'm also very interested in like the business side of things, so I think producing would just be like a great combination of theater and business. I think you can, and I want to use kind of producing to continue my advocacy. So I produced at Carnegie Hall, and I want to continue to produce at various venues. And at Carnegie Hall, basically, what we did was we had performers, just student performers from different ethnicities, different demographics, just all over the world. And I really thought that like during that show, I thought it was kind of like a melting pot of all different ethnicities and cultures, and I really want to continue doing that with producing. So that's something that I look forward to after college, and also like during college as well, if I get the opportunity to.
Okay, wonderful. Now we have a question from Quentin Gong. They say, hi, Rosanna. Thanks for your amazing presentation. I have a question. What is the Asian culture element in cinema meant to you? And in your view, what does the original Asian culture element look like in your understanding? And also, how can we bring the traditional Asian culture element to the cinema in a proper way?
Yeah, this is a great question. So first, what it means to me, kind of, I think is more about my experience and the immigrant story. My parents immigrated here from Winzhou, China, and I have two younger siblings. I'm the firstborn. So ever since when I was growing up, I've definitely seen the kind of Asian American immigrant struggle and the struggle between kind of their traditional past in China, as well as how America has been definitely more left and Western leaning. I've definitely seen that like dynamic and tension. And for me, I think being Asian American is a very unique experience, and a lot of it has come from my parents. And I think whenever it comes to my work, it's a lot about representation and just voices being heard, because I want like all individuals to be able, especially BIPOC individuals, to be able to share their stories, which haven't been very mainstream. Like, I really hope to produce a story about my parents, how they immigrated to the United States, and kind of share these because these haven't been popular. Like, these stories haven't been told in media before. So that's kind of how theater and representation in film means to me. And then what was the second question?
I believe that was the question. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, before the next question, we have a comment. We have from Evelyn. She says, it is important to stress that the problems have not yet gone away, so it is important to listen to different voices, cultures, and individualities in the cinematic sphere. It really is a very interesting debate, and I just don't just say about the problems, of course, but about cinema as a whole and the opportunities. So thank you. It's a wonderful comment.
Yeah.
And now we have a question from Pratish. He says, Hi, Rosanna. I'm from the South Asian country of Nepal. I'm currently leading a film and theater-based small organization in a remote village. Can you please say something about your experience in organizational skills?
Yes, I think a lot of what it comes with like organizations is just being proactive. I remember beginning Music for Change. Okay, I think you can't really rely on anyone, and you need to be the person to do it sometimes. And I think that that was kind of difficult for me because I also had a co-founder. So a lot of the times I was like, let's split this work and get it done. And sometimes people are busy, things happen, and you just need to be the person to sit down and do the work and just be proactive. So I think that is like a big like skill you must learn if you want to like run an organization. And then I also think that on top of that, I think that being extremely proactive, meaning being like seeing opportunities and seeing how you can kind of fit in those opportunities. So I remember during the rise of the pandemic when I was home, kind of just beginning the organization itself, I saw that, all of these theaters were closing down and people wanted to showcase their talent. But how are we going to do that? And I was like, oh, YouTube is a great way to do that. So I think kind of just like seeing seeing the demand of things. If the demand is high and there kind of isn't something that is able to like be a solution to that, being the solution yourself. And I think that it comes with a lot of experience and hard work. I don't think it's easy as well at all, and there are so many times where I had like literal meltdowns. I remember in high school because of how like stressful it can be. But I think just having like a positive mindset and just starting one already is just like a great first step.
Thank you. All right, and now we have a question from Sanada, and they say, Hi, I have another question. Why did you choose to pursue theater studies in Yale?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I've done theater all my life, so I really wanted to just kind of continue that theater aspect at Yale. They have a lot of great professors in who are like a part of Broadway, a part of major theater organizations, and I kind of just wanted to get that connection at a school where theater and the arts is like very popular. So that's kind of the main reason why I wanted to continue that. And what I really like about my theater classes at Yale is that it's not just like acting. There's like all different types of classes. So whether it's producing, theater history, even like there's a lot of like film classes within the theater department as well that I'm taking. So there's just like an ambiance of classes. Love the department, and I just really wanted to continue one of my passions in high school, which is why I majored in it.
Okay, thank you very much. Looks like we have time for about just one or two more questions. So if anyone has more questions in the chat, I would love to have them. In the meantime, I'll ask a question. What was one of your favorite films with Asian American representation?
This is a very great question. I loved Minari. It was Okay, well, I said this before. Films don't really make me cry, but I think that it really resonated with me a lot. And it was also about kind of like the Asian American immigration story. I think it really reflected, a lot of the challenges that my parents faced, that I faced. And even though it was about, just mentioning something earlier, even though it was, about the Asian American immigration story, that story is so, even though there were similarities, it's so different from my family's immigration story. So I think that the reason why this resonates with me so much is because having like all of these different stories and identities being shown is just, it has like a lasting impact. So Minari is definitely my fave.
Thank you. And we see some comments in the chat from Alex. Everything Everywhere All at Once, so like you mentioned in the presentation, that was his favorite. Thank you. So we have time for one more question. We have from Guy. He says, thank you so much for such an amazing presentation. To my question, how many people in the Los Angeles area are Asian American compared to the very small percent of those in Hollywood?
I'm not too sure. I think I would have to do more diving into the percentages somewhere. So yeah. Sorry, I'm not able to answer that.
It's okay. All right, thank you. All right, so with that, we're going to conclude our speaker session today with Rosanna Gao from Yale University. Wonderful having you here today, Rosanna. It's terrific to have your presentation and learn about the very inspiring work that you do and that you advocate for your programs and for your studies at Yale. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so great meeting